Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing 10 cards I made using Love From Lizi's So Woodland paper pack. This pack includes 16 sheets of 8x8 pattern paper. Half of it is double-sided and the other half have a specialty feature on it, such as gold foil, fabric feel, pearlescent, and then some spot gloss. The colors in this paper are very soft and the designs are more of a shabby chic look. I actually tried to keep my cards on the simpler side, but of course I still had to add in some cardstock for all of the matted layers. So getting started on card number 1, I'm using Freshly Made Sketches number 258. To save time, I've gone ahead and cut out all of the pieces to the measurements on the sketch, and I do list all of the sketches with measurements on my coordinating blog, and that link is in the description box. For the main image on this card, I used one of the pattern papers that has this really lovely spot gloss to it. It's on some of the birds and the little butterflies, and I just cut out one of the corners so that I could feature this little bird and then the tree and the little nest on there, and it kind of has a little ticket on the side, so very kind of vintage look to it. And this cardstock that I'm using has a slight pearlescent look to it, so it adds just that little extra shine. And I just cut this little banner to put in that upper corner, and then I pulled out one of the brads from a previous Love From Lizi kit. Whenever I use some of Love From Lizi's 8x8 papers or her mega packs, I like to look in all of the leftovers from the previous monthly kits, because there's always some stuff in there that's perfect to just include in another paper collection. And then also for the stamp set, this is one of Love From Lizi's from a previous kit, and I love just the general sentiments. I use them all the time, so the little for you was just perfect. And then I wrap some twine around the card just to kind of anchor this sentiment on there, and it's kind of replacing that little thin strip that's on the sketch. I do change the sketches all the time, and a lot of times they're just an inspiration to get started. So I put a ton of adhesive on the back. I do have that twine that goes behind, and so I just want to make sure that my card front stays on my card base. And since there is a little bit of dimension with the twine, I'm just putting a little bit of foam dimensional tape and kind of sandwiching the twine just with that sentiment there. So overall, I kept this card fairly simple, but I love the colors, and then just having that general sentiment on there. This could be perfect for a birthday or even a sympathy card. So now jumping into card number 2, this is Mojo Monday sketch number 504. And again, I'm using one of the pattern papers that has larger images. So this one has this beautiful gold foil bird on there, and I didn't want to cut any of that apart. So I made sure to do a little bit larger rectangle so that I could really feature that bird on this card. And then you can see there's an oval cut out of that cardstock layer, and that's because I'm going to be using that cardstock for the matting of my sentiment. So I just have some ivory cardstock here, and then I'm using another previous Love From Lizi sentiment set. This was from the May kit, and I just love it, and it is actually available. I will link all of the products in the description box below if it's something that you can still purchase. So I decided I'm just going to add a little more sparkle and shine to this card. So I'm going to go ahead and emboss with Love From Lizi's Golden Glitz embossing powder. And this is just beautiful. So it has just a hint of glitter on there in this lovely gold color. So let's go ahead and get my heat gun out. You can't really see it very well. I guess I'm not always angling it properly, but it's just beautiful. And some of this glitter does come off just slightly, so if you do donate your cards to maybe the hospital or service members in the military, I would advise not using anything with just a trace of glitter, just for safety. It's always better to not put anybody at risk. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop up that sentiment using some foam tape. And then I have these beautiful gold gems that were in, I believe, the February Love from Lizi kit. So I still had a bunch of them left over. Don't want them to go to waste, of course. So they matched beautifully with this whole paper pack with all of the gold foil in there. So I just put 3 of them in that kind of upper corner and then 3 below in that lower left-hand corner, kind of in place of those real thin strips on the sketch. So I really love how this one turned out with that pink and that real light kind of a sage green. So that is card number 2. So now moving on to card number 3. I used Sketch Saturday number 525 for the card. The background paper has this really nice spot gloss with all these little polka dots on it. So I thought that would be a nice tone-on-tone background. And then all of my matted layers are generally another 1/8 of an inch added to whatever the measurements are on my sketch. But like I said, I don't always follow my sketches exactly with the measurements. They're just kind of a starting base of inspiration. So for the sentiment strip on the bottom of the card, I decided to add just a little extra shine. So I pulled out one of Love from Lizi's peel-offs, and this is, I believe, the clear gold mirror. That's the right name for it. And it's the medium width that I just put it all across that bottom sentiment strip. And then I just used a lawn fawn stamp. I believe it came free with an order, so it's not something that's actually available, but just a really nice script thanks on there, because thank you cards are always handy to have. So it's going to go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And then I use this beautiful pearlescent paper with, it's just full of beautiful butterflies. And that's going to be the main focal point of my card. And I just layered that with a scalloped blue oval. And since this oval is going to go over this sentiment strip, I don't want any of it sagging or kind of lopsided on the card. So I'm just adding some thin foam squares so that it's nice and even on the card. And then just little finishing embellishments. I used some butterfly dies that were in a previous Love from Lizi mega kit. And I just added some more of the foam squares to part of the butterflies. The other side, this left-hand side of the larger butterfly, I just put some liquid adhesive. So once again, that it's nice and even on the card. And then I pulled out those gold gems from the previous card. I'm going to add 3 of them to the upper right-hand corner. And these are self-adhesive, but I tend to add some extra liquid adhesive just to make sure they stay put on my cards. So there is card number 3. I really like this light blue with just that touch of gold. So I think this is one of my favorite cards. Be sure to leave me a comment and let me know which card is your favorite. It's always fun to hear. So now moving on to card number 4, I'm using Operation Write Home sketch number 160. And for this card, I'm using a lot of gold, and then I'm adding the contrast of the black cardstock. So I thought that worked really well together. For the background, there's these 5 1-inch strips, and I used just one of the pattern papers. It's this sheet music, and I thought it would work well for the background. It's not really tone on tone, but it's definitely a little more muted design. So when I lay all of these out, I work kind of from the outside in, trying to make sure I get my placement nice and even. And then I'm layering all this with just some thin black cardstock, and then also layering it with some gold mirror paper. I love all the extra shine. And then the main pattern paper has all these little yellow birds on that, and then I layered that with some more black cardstock. And then the paper behind those birds is this beautiful gold foil design, like a real intricate pattern on there. So this card definitely has a lot of layers to it, but it's still overall very flat because I'm not adding any extra dimension. So now for the sentiment, I used another Love from Lizi stamp set. This was from a previous kit. I'm just using the With Love sentiment, stamp that in some black, just on some ivory cardstock. And then I'm just going to cut a little fishtail on one of the sides, layer that again with some black cardstock. And I don't always measure out like how big my matting layer is going to be. Sometimes I just eyeball it. But generally my matted layers are an additional 1/8 of an inch from the measurements listed on the sketches. So since I didn't want that right-hand side of the sentiment banner to sag on my card, I just put a little piece of foam dimensional tape there, and then I just used some ATG for the rest of the adhesive. Then once again, pulling out some more of these gold gems. I'm kind of starting to run out now, so it's kind of nice to use up some products that are in your stash. So I just put 2 of them in that upper left-hand corner and then just 1 of them by the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 4. And now moving on to card number 5. I used MFT sketch number 313. And overall, I think this paper pack is definitely on the feminine side, but there's still some papers in there that I think will work perfect for masculine cards as well. So I'm using this kind of a mustard color. I guess it's a little more of a tan. It's got a chevron design on it for the background. And then on this pattern paper, this sort of has a fabric feel to it. It has a bunch of different little, it's almost like a bunch of pictures put together in little rectangles. So I just cut out 1 of them, and that's going to be the main image on my card. Now, since it does have this fabric texture to it, I find that it doesn't always adhere well to cardstock. So I did use some ATG, and then just to ensure it's going to stay put, I also put a strip of score tape because that always holds everything really securely. I'm just layering all of this in some real dark green cardstock that I just have in my stash. And then again, since I like to keep everything fairly even on my card, I'm just putting some thin foam squares above and below where that banner is on my card. And I just flip over the piece so I know where to put all of those little foam squares. So then when I reflip it over, it lines up just beautifully. And since I'm going to make this card more for masculine than a feminine card, I'm not going to add a lot of extra shine or anything. But I do have just a really small piece of some gold satin paper. So it just has a real soft look to it, but not like glittery or anything. So I'm just using that as this little tiny banner that's going to go on that right-hand side. I'm using just a small piece of score tape and then just 1 little square of the foam dimension, just so once again it's nice and even on my card. And then just a last finishing touch, I cut out some really small stitched circle die cuts and just put those in the upper left-hand corner. And then I don't always show, but I generally add just a thin strip of the leftover pattern paper to the inside of each of my cards. So there is the finished card number 5. And now moving on to card number 6, I'm using Sweet Sunday sketch number 236. On one of the previous cards where I had this lovely gold bird, that same pattern paper had this beautiful gold flowers in the corner. So I'm going to use that as the main focal point on this card. I think the touches of gold works really nicely with this sort of dusty pink color. So I used some more of this gold foil, real intricate design for that strip that goes across the card. And then I just used some solid cardstock for this little stitched scallop border die. And then I just adhered that onto the gold paper using some score tape. And now I'm just using some gold peel-offs, just putting, I think I used the medium width, this might be the widest width, on each side of that gold paper. But I just used some of my scraps since that main little area is going to be covered with the image. It's always nice to be able to use up those scraps of your peel-offs because you never want those to go to waste. So I'll go ahead and adhere that image onto the card. Look at all that beautiful shine. I know it looks a little more yellow just because of my overhead lights, but it's definitely gold. And I decided not to add foam squares to this image, but since it's going over those couple other layers, so there's like 3 other layers, it kind of had a little bit of a bump. So I just put a piece of solid cardstock underneath that top portion of the image, just to kind of even it out on the card. And then a finishing touch, I'm going to use a few rose gold sequins. So I'm just kind of following this sketch pretty closely this time. I really love the simplicity of this card. It has a lot of shine to it, and I did decide to just leave off a sentiment. That way it'll work for any occasion. So now moving on to card number 7. This is MFT sketch number 351. So I have 2 different pattern papers for the background, and I'm kind of making a little bit of a scene. It's not going to be like over extreme or anything, but I have this blue tone-on-tone design for the background and then this green floral design for the bottom. So that'll kind of be the grassy hill, I guess. And I just used a stitched scalloped die just to cut that little curve. So it follows the sketch very closely. And you can see I have a little cutout of the background. And this background paper is some of the gold satin mirror paper. And then I used this Hello die, and this is part of one of From Lizi's mega packs. This is from the Unicorn Dreams. The mega packs are so fun since they generally include a nice set of dies. And so you can use those again and again. And I love just general sentiment, so this hello was perfect. And I just did a quick inlay with some white cardstock for the hello word. And then just to kind of anchor that sentiment onto the card, I'm using some more of the clear gold mirror peel-offs. This is the widest width. And then I decided to also use some of the narrowest width. So I'm just going across the card, leaving a little bit of gap. So I'm trying to use as many of the little scraps that I have, but sometimes I have to go and use a full piece again, but that's okay. I always have extras on hand because I never want to run out of peel-offs. So now I'll just pull off the score tape that I had on the back when I was inlaying this piece, and I'll just adhere that right onto my card. And then pulling out some more pieces from previous From Lizi kits. I have these beautiful blue butterflies, so I thought that would be a nice addition to my little scene. And now I'm down to 4 little gold gems, so I'm just going to put 3 of them in that lower corner. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to add that 4th one, but it just really wasn't going to look right. So we just stuck with the 3. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 7. And now moving on to card number 8. I used MFT sketch number 353. And I just loved this pearlescent paper. It has all of these beautiful flowers on there. So this one is like, I think it's a hibiscus. Not really sure about flowers, but I wanted to make sure that was going to be a focal point on one of my cards. So I just used a circle die and made sure to cut out just that main pink flower. And then I just have some chevron paper for the background. I'm wrapping a few of the gold moon dust peel-offs on the bottom of the card just to add in a little more shimmer. Kind of goes well with that pearlescent paper. And then I rounded those top 2 corners of the pattern paper. And then this corner the circle goes off of the paper slightly. So I just used my trimmer and then just cut a nice edge, adhered that onto the card. Then I'm going to put my card front onto a card base. And sometimes I don't cut my card bases perfectly or my card front perfectly. So I do just trim just the little sliver of the white card base off because I don't want any of that showing. So now for the sentiment, I'm going to use this fun kind of wavy design sentiment. This is a lawn fawn set. And the first one I didn't get it very straight, so I had to restamp it. And I just stamped it on some ivory paper. And I had debated about layering with that same pink cardstock, but decided against it because I think it still had enough contrast on the rest of the card. But I'm just going to pop it up slightly using some thin foam squares. And then just a finishing touch, I cut a small banner using some gold satin mirror paper. So overall, a very simple card, but I think it turned out just beautifully. So that is card number 8. So now on to card number 9. I'm using MFT sketch number 416. One of my favorite sketches. If you follow my videos, you'll see me use this one all the time. So the background paper has this real muted design it has a script on there, some word script, but you can't really read it. But then it has a hint of these butterflies, almost like a silhouette, but in different colors. So I thought I'd match that with some of this butterfly pearlescent paper, and I used this on a previous card. And then using a same technique I did before, I'm just putting a peel off strip on that bottom of the sentiment strip, pulled out that Lawn Fawn Thanks stamp again. I use this one quite a bit. It's just a really nice font and it's a good size. So I stamp that on the left hand side, so that way I have room on the right hand side to add an image. So I'm going to stick with the butterflies for this card. So I used a previous Love from Lizi mega pack, and this had a bunch of butterfly dies in it. So I cut it out twice, once with some of this blue cardstock and then again with this gold satin mirror cardstock. So I'm going to do a little inlay technique on here. So I'll just put some score tape on the back side of the blue die cut. And then I'll take all of these teeny tiny little pieces of gold and then inlay it straight into there. That way it's nice and flat, and then you don't have to deal with any liquid adhesive, since that always gets so messy. And these pieces are really tiny. So I got a few of them in, but then I had to go and grab my little jewel picker tool just because I couldn't pick up those teeny tiny ones at all. I do still have to flip them over though, that way I get them in correctly. So I love this real soft blue with just that nice gold. And since it's the gold satin paper, it has that real soft look to it. So once I make sure I get all of those pieces in there and I have it all backed with some score tape, I'm just going to pull off the backing of the score tape. And then I just adhere that straight to the card. I decided not to add any extra dimension. And then just a little finishing touch, I used some more of that gold satin paper and just cut a small banner. So there is card number 9. And now moving on to my final card, card number 10. I used reverse confetti sketch number 37. And sorry, I obviously printed this sketch really large. Would have been nice to be a little bit smaller. It didn't give me as much workspace, but that's okay. So I'm using some more of this pink chevron paper for the background. And then I decided to also use this kind of pink polka dot paper for that main strip going down the card. And then I used some gold mirror paper for 3 little banners. Try to make them fairly even on the card. Just adding some ATG to the back of that. And I used a little thicker matting this time. So I think I did about 1/4 of an inch for all around the card. So now I went and pulled out that hello sentiment again. Since I had the inside left over from the previous card, although I did go and recut all of these because I decided to use the mirror paper instead of the satin paper. But I cut out 3 of the hello words and I'm just adhering those onto the card in place of where the circle elements are on the sketch. So I'll have hello, hello, hello for my sentiment. So I love this pink paired up with the gold specialty papers. I'm so addicted to all of these beautiful specialty papers, so I always make sure to have plenty of it on hand. Every month with the release, Love from Lizi always has several different specialty paper bundles, and those are always a popular item. They do sell out very quickly, but they are so nice to have on hand, especially if you make a lot of cards like I do. So just the finishing touch, I did add just some more of the gold peel-offs just to edge that polka dot paper on the card. So that was my final card. And now here's just a quick recap of the 10 cards I made using Love from Lizi's So Woodland 8x8 paper pack. I really enjoy the nice variety of paper collections that Love from Lizi sells. I have provided a link in the description box if you are interested in any of the items that I used in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.